Good day, children. How are you? I hope you all are hale and hearty and having a good time. Well, I'm Satinder Kaur and today I'll be taking up part 2 of lesson 2 of Democratic Politics for class 9. And the name of the lesson is Constitutional Design. In the first video, you learned about how the people of South Africa under the leadership of Mr. Nelson Mandela struggled against the oppressive system of apartheid and established democracy in their country, and then how they went about the task of designing a constitution for their country. In this part, we shall learn about the making of Indian Constitution, how it was made and who all played an important role in it. We shall also talk about the guiding principles of the Indian Constitution. Children, do you know how much time did it take to frame our Constitution? It took 2 years, 11 months and 17 days to complete it. Children, like South Africa, India's Constitution was also drawn up under very difficult circumstances. The making of the Constitution for a huge and diverse country like India was not an easy affair. At that time, the people of India were moving toward becoming citizens from subjects. The country had suffered the pain of partition on the basis of religious differences. This was a traumatic experience for the people of India and Pakistan. At least 10 lakh people were killed on both sides of the border in partition-related violence. There was another problem. The British had left it to the rulers of the princely states to decide whether they wanted to merge with India or with Pakistan or remain independent. The merger of these princely states was a difficult and uncertain task. When the Constitution was being written, the future of the country did not look as secure as it does today. The makers of the Constitution had anxieties about the present as well as the future of the country. Children, I want you to speak to your grandparents or some other elders and ask them if they have any memory of partition or independence or the making of the Constitution. What were their fears and hopes about the country at that time? Now, despite all these difficulties, there was one big advantage for the makers of the Indian Constitution. Unlike South Africa, they did not have to create a consensus, means an agreement among people, about what a democratic India should look like, because much of this consensus had already evolved during the freedom struggle. Our national movement was not merely a struggle against a foreign rule. It was also a struggle to revive our country and to transform our society and politics. No doubt there were sharp differences of opinion within the freedom struggle about the path India should take after independence. Such differences exist even today. Yet, some basic ideas had come to be accepted by almost everyone. In 1928, Motilal Nehru and 8 other Congress leaders drafted a constitution for India. In 1931, the resolution at the Karachi session of the Indian National Congress talked about how independent India's constitution should look like. Both these documents were committed to the inclusion of universal adult franchise, right to freedom and equality, and to protecting the rights of minorities in the Constitution of Independent India. Thus, some basic values were accepted by all leaders much before the Constituent Assembly met to deliberate on the Constitution. Apart from this, the familiarity with political institutions of colonial rule also helped in deciding over the institutional design. The British rule had given voting rights only to a few. On that basis, the British had introduced very weak legislatures. Elections were held in 1937 to provincial legislatures and ministries all over British India. These were not fully democratic governments, but the experience gained by Indians in the working of legislative institutions proved to be very useful for the country in setting up its own institutions and working in them. That is why the Indian Constitution adopted many institutional details and procedures from colonial laws like the Government of India Act 1935. Years of thinking and deliberation on the framework of the Constitution had another benefit. Our leaders gained confidence to learn from other countries. Many of our leaders were inspired by the ideals of French Revolution, the practice of parliamentary democracy in Britain, and the Bill of Rights in the US. The Socialist Revolution in Russia had inspired many Indians to think of shaping a system based on social and economic equality. Yet, they were not simply imitating what others had done. At each step, they were questioning whether these things suited our country. So, children, all these factors contributed to the making of our Constitution. Now, the question is, who made the Indian Constitution? So, children, this task was done by the Constituent Assembly. It was an assembly of elected representatives. Elections to the Constituent Assembly were held in July 1946. Its first meeting was held in December 1946. Soon after, the country was divided into India and Pakistan. The Constituent Assembly was also divided into the Constituent Assembly of India and that of Pakistan. The Constituent Assembly that wrote the Indian Constitution had 299 members. The Assembly adopted the Constitution on 26 November 1949, but it came into effect on 26 January 1950. And to mark this day, we celebrate January 26 as Republic Day every year. Now the question is, why should we accept the Constitution made by this Assembly more than 6 decades ago? We have already noted one reason above. The Constitution does not reflect the views of its members alone. It expresses a broad consensus of its time. Do you know, children? Many countries of the world had to rewrite their constitution because the basic rules were not acceptable to all major social groups or political parties. In some other countries, the constitution exists as a mere piece of paper. No one actually follows it, but the experience of our constitution is different. Over the last half a century, several groups have questioned some provisions of the Constitution, but no large social group or political party has ever questioned the legitimacy of the Constitution itself. This is an unusual achievement for any constitution. The second reason for accepting the Constitution is that the Constituent Assembly represented the people of India. Children, there was no universal adult franchise at that time. So, the Constituent Assembly could not have been chosen directly by all the people of India. It was elected mainly by the members of the existing provincial legislatures that we talked about earlier, and thus all the regions got a fair representation in the Constituent Assembly. the assembly was dominated by the Indian National Congress, the party that led India's freedom struggle, which itself included a variety of political groups and opinions. The assembly also had many members who did not agree with the Congress. In social terms too, the assembly represented members of different languages, different language groups, castes, classes, religions, and occupations. Even if the Constituent Assembly was elected by universal adult franchise, its composition would not have been very different. Finally, the manner in which the Constituent Assembly worked gives sanctity to the Constitution. The Constituent Assembly worked in a systematic, open, and consensual manner. First, some basic principles were decided and agreed upon. Then, a drafting committee chaired by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar prepared a draft constitution for discussion. Several rounds of thorough discussion took place on the draft constitution. Clause by clause, more than 2,000 amendments were considered. The members deliberated for 114 days, spread over a period of 3 years. Every document presented and every word spoken in the Constituent Assembly has been recorded and preserved. These have been printed in 12 bulky volumes called Constituent Assembly Debates. These debates provide the logic behind every provision of the Constitution. These are also used to interpret the meaning of the Constitution. Children, now let's talk about some of the makers of the Indian Constitution. First of all, take a look at this picture of Vallabhbhai Jhavarbhai Patel, who was born in Gujarat. He became the Minister of Home, Information and Broadcasting in the interim government. He also played a decisive role in the integration of the Indian princely states. Later, he became Deputy Prime Minister. He is also known as Iron Man of India. Now we have the picture of Abul Kalam Azad, who was born in Saudi Arabia. He was an educationist, author and scholar of Arabic. He opposed Muslim separatist politics and later he became Education Minister in the first Union Cabinet. Then we have the picture of T.T. Krishnamachari, who was born in Tamil Nadu. He was a member of the drafting committee. Later, he became Finance Minister in the Union Cabinet. Children, this is the picture of Sri Rajendra Prasad, who was born in Bihar. He was the President of the Constituent Assembly. Later, he became the first President of India. Next, we have the picture of H.C. Mukherjee. He was born in Bengal. He was the Vice Chairman of the Constituent Assembly. Later, he became the Governor of West Bengal. Now we have the picture of Mr. Baldev Singh, who was born in Haryana. He was a leader of the Panthik Akali Party in the Punjab Assembly. Later, he became Defence Minister in the Union Cabinet. Children, I'm sure you recognize this gentleman in the picture. Yes, Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. He was born in Madhya Pradesh and was the chairman of the drafting committee. Later, he became Law Minister in the first cabinet of post-independence India. Now we have the picture of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who was born in Uttar Pradesh. He was the Prime Minister of the interim government and later he became the first Prime Minister of India. Now we have the picture of Srimati Sarojini Naidu, who was born in Andhra Pradesh. She was a poet, writer and political activist. Later, she became the governor of Uttar Pradesh. Children, now I want you to find out if there was any member of the Constituent Assembly from your state or region. Make a sketch of that leader and write a short note on him or her. Now let's move ahead and understand the guiding values of our Constitution. We can do this by reading the views of our leaders as well as by reading the preamble of the Constitution. So let's first read the views of some of our leaders and understand what they wanted the Indian Constitution to do. Although Mahatma Gandhi was not a member of the Constituent Assembly, yet there were many members who followed his vision. Years ago, writing in his magazine Young India in 1931, he had outlined his vision in the following words: I shall strive for a constitution which will release India from all thraldom and patronage. I shall work for an India in which the poorest shall feel that it is their country, in whose making they have an effective voice, an India in which there shall be no high class and low class of people, an India in which all communities shall live in perfect harmony. There can be no room in such an India for the curse of untouchability or the curse of the intoxicating drinks and drugs. Women will enjoy the same rights as men. I shall be satisfied with nothing else. This dream of an India that has no place for inequality was shared by Dr. Ambedkar, who played a key role in the making of the Constitution. But he had a different understanding of how inequalities could be removed. He often bitterly criticized Mahatma Gandhi and his vision. Let's read his concluding speech to the Constituent Assembly, in which he stated his anxiety very clearly. On the 26th of January 1950, we are going to enter a life of contradictions. In politics, we will have equality, and in social and economic life, we will have inequality. In politics, we will be recognizing the principle of one man, one vote, and one vote, one value. In our social and economic life, we shall, by reason of our social and economic structure, continue to deny the principle of one man, one value. How long shall we continue to live this life of contradictions? How long shall we continue to deny equality in our social and economic life? If we continue to deny it for long, we will do so only by putting our political democracy in peril. So children, these were the views of Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. Finally, let's hear Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru giving his famous speech to the Constituent Assembly at the stroke of midnight on 15th August 1947.
Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
Children, after knowing the views of these leaders, you must have got a fair idea about what kind of values were included in our Constitution. Now let's move ahead and talk about the preamble. Children, preamble is an introductory statement in a Constitution which states the reason and the guiding values of the Constitution. These values guide all the articles of the Constitution. Taking inspiration from American model, Most countries in the world begin their constitutions with a preamble. Children, this is the preamble of the Constitution of the United States. Let's read it. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now let's read the preamble of the South African Constitution. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. We, therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law. Improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person and build a united and democratic South Africa able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. May God protect our people. God bless South Africa. Children, I hope you got an idea about what a preamble is. Now let's talk about the preamble of our Constitution. The preamble of the Indian Constitution reads like a poem on democracy. It contains the philosophy on which the entire Constitution has been built. It provides a standard to examine and evaluate any law and action of government to find out whether it is good or bad. It is the soul of the Indian Constitution. Now let's read it carefully. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic and to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. In our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact and give to ourselves this Constitution. Now let's try to understand its keywords one by one. First we have we the people of India, which means the Constitution has been drawn up and enacted by the people through their representatives and not handed down to them by a king or any outside powers. Next we have the term sovereign, which means people have supreme right to make decisions on internal as well as external matters. No external power can dictate the government of India. The next keyword is socialist, which means wealth is generated socially and should be shared equally by society. Government should regulate the ownership of land and industry to reduce socio-economic inequalities. Then we have the term secular, which means citizens have complete freedom to follow any religion. but there is no official religion. Government treats all religious beliefs and practices with equal respect. Next, we have the term democratic, which means the country has a form of government where people enjoy equal political rights, elect their rulers, and hold them accountable. The government is run according to some basic rules. The next keyword is republic, which means the head of the state is an elected person and not a hereditary position. Next, we have the term justice, which means citizens cannot be discriminated on the grounds of caste, religion, and gender. Social inequalities have to be reduced. Government should work for the welfare of all, especially of the disadvantaged groups. The next term is liberty, which means there are no unreasonable restrictions on the citizens in what they think, how they wish to express their thoughts, and the way they wish to follow up their thoughts in action. Then there is the term equality, which means all are equal before the law. The traditional social inequalities have to be ended. The government should ensure equal opportunity for all. Last, we have the term fraternity, which means all of us should behave as if we are members of the same family. No one should treat a fellow citizen as inferior. Children, you should know that the terms socialist and secular were added in the preamble through the 42nd Constitutional Amendment in 1976. Children, a constitution is not merely a statement of values and philosophy. A constitution is mainly about embodying these values into institutional arrangements. Much of the document called Constitution of India is about these arrangements. It is a very long and detailed document. Therefore, it needs to be amended quite regularly to keep it updated. Those who made the Indian Constitution felt that it has to be in accordance with people's aspirations and changes in society. They did not see it as a sacred, static, and unalterable law. So, they made provisions to incorporate changes from time to time. These changes are called constitutional amendments. The Constitution describes the institutional arrangements in a very legal language. If you read the Constitution for the first time, it can be quite difficult for you to understand. Yet, the basic institutional design is not very difficult to understand. Like any constitution, the Indian Constitution lays down a procedure for choosing persons to govern the country. It defines who will have how much power to take which decisions, and it puts limits to what the government can do by providing some rights to the citizen that cannot be violated. So children, that was all about the lesson. I hope you understood it well. In the coming lessons too, we will talk about some key constitutional provisions and understand how they work in democratic politics. Now it's time to take up a few exercises related to the chapter. First, we have some sentences and you have to tell if these sentences are true or false. The first sentence is, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar was the first president of India. So children, is it true or false? This sentence is false because Dr. Ambedkar was not the first president of India. Rather, he was the first law minister of the country. The second question is, the elections to the provincial legislatures were held in India in 1937. So children, this sentence is true. The next sentence is, the Constitution of India cannot be amended. This sentence is false. We just read about constitutional amendments, that the Constitution can be amended as per the needs of the times. Now let's move further and take a look at the last sentence. A democracy cannot function without a constitution. Yes, it is absolutely true. Now let's move further and match the names of these leaders with their roles in the making of the constitution. First we have Motilal Nehru, and he prepared a constitution for India in 1928. Next we have B.R. Ambedkar. He was the chairman of the drafting committee. Next we have Rajendra Prasad. He was the president of the Constituent Assembly. Last we have Sarojini Naidu. She was a member of the Constituent Assembly. Now we have some of the guiding values of the Constitution and the meaning. You have to match them correctly. First we have sovereign, which means yes, people have the supreme right to make decisions. Next we have republic, which means head of the state is an elected person. Next is fraternity, which means people should live like brothers and sisters. Good. Last one is secular, which means government will not favor any religion. Very good. Children, now we have some questions which you have to answer in 1 or 2 words. And the first question is, who drafted the Constitution of India? And the answer is, yes, the Constituent Assembly. Second question is, who was the president of the Constituent Assembly? And the answer is Dr. Rajendra Prasad. The third question is, how much time was taken to complete the Constitution of India? Yes, 2 years, 11 months and 17 days. The next question is, how many members were there in the Constituent Assembly of India? Yes, you're right, 299 members. And the last question of the day, when did our Constitution come into being? And the answer is 26 January 1950. Very good. With this, we come to the end of today's video. I'm sure you liked it and got to know a great deal about Indian Constitution, how it was made and what its guiding principles are. That's all for now. I'll be back soon with some more interesting videos. Till then, stay healthy, stay happy.